Hello and welcome. It's me, Percita, and this is Percita's Paradox. Thank you so much for joining me. I greatly appreciate you today. If you're new to this channel, thank you for joining me. And if you are an OG, an original subscriber and follower, thank you so much for always continually to support me on this channel. So today, I just really wanted to get on this topic of soft life. I think it is very interesting how it's now become the mantra of women. And I don't think it's a bad thing. But I really am interested in knowing what your definition of soft life is. So the question for today is, what is your definition of soft life? Now, I've read a few, and for the people who have not heard this term, I was speaking about it in our last video where talking about women, particularly in the Black community, really having this desire to really get the connotation and stereotypical attitude about Black women as if we just want, to be dominant and like running things and just always want to be, the boss bee and, all of that. This is her and, drama, right? I mean, there's nothing wrong with that. So let me say that and let me clarify it before you think this is a bash video. It really isn't. But it's really a video to just define individually, because I don't think this is something that you can define out loud, nor do I think that most people have the courage to do it. I think it's really more of the idea within yourself of what that is. So I'll continue by saying, because Black women have always been under this scrutiny of having to do it on her own and, being confrontational and, the entrepreneur, but she's really kind of like the take charge, not really feminine woman. I know that sounds crazy, but as a Black woman and a Black woman who has been an entrepreneur for over 20 years, I can say that there is this weird energy that comes off of people when they see you as a Black woman trying to do business and do it in a manner that would be classified as standard for any other culture. But there's something about being Black that makes it very complicated for you to actually handle your business and handle it in an unapologetically solid way of perfection and the attributes of being very serious about your work without really being demonized as someone that's conflictual or confrontational, right? Or not soft or not feminine or none of those things. And I think we, as Black women entrepreneurs and business owners, have had this thing for a very long time. So I give you that background for you to understand that the newness of this idea of soft life is really interesting to actually put it in a phrase of soft life. I'm not quite sure. I have not decided if I'm really down with that term. I typically don't really like to fall into any sense of trend when it comes to words, because I am a English major and a psychology-based student. So it's very complicated for me to just run with something because it sounds good in social media platforms. But I will say I understand what the overall ideology of it is, right? And what I mean by that is women of color, particularly Black women, because I'm Black, so I can't speak for other cultures, I can speak for me. We are definitely interested in being more feminine than we are told that we should be, right? We are told to be strong, and we're told that we need to continuously basically take anything that anyone gives us on any part, be it in our relationships, be it in our business aspects of life, be it within our circles of friends. We're just not really given the opportunity to be soft. So I understand the idea of soft, because when you think of any other woman who gets the opportunity to run a business, she is continuously identified as a wonderful, feminine, petite, whatever you want to call it, scenario of a woman who's just basically doing great in her business. But when it's a person of color or a Black woman, it's a completely different definition. So when I think soft, again, I'm always in this space of saying what I think we're trying to say. My overall identity of understanding what that statement soft life is that we just want to be identified as feminine women. And when I say feminine, I mean it in the sense of not trying to overtake the masculine perspective or the masculine role or anything of the sort. I mean, we're just not interested in that. Every woman has the ability to be a take charge person because that's just what the woman's nature is as a whole. We're nurturers. We are the suppliers of life. We are the person who basically is burning the midnight oil while everyone is sleeping in her household to make sure things are running efficiently for the most part, 99.9% of the time. But the difference between being a black woman and just a woman in general is that we get extra connotations on doing it because of the way that we may come across in doing it. Meaning, a black woman has always been identified as someone who has to be dominant and loud and, outspoken and basically the type of person that's going to come into a room and disrupt it, when it's really not very true at all. For the most part, we're still wanting to be soft-spoken, right? But there's no way to be soft-spoken when you're in a society that really doesn't allow you to do that because you're still in the minority-based, lower-class identity. Even if your money's right, your car is fantastic, your house is right, your children aren't going to private school, none of that really matters because there's still this thing called skin color that you're going to be identified as. And because typically a black woman is not going to not stand out in a room because she's typically standing in a room of power or progression alone. There's not a lot of camaraderie in regards to being more than the other in the room, meaning there's typically only one black person in a room of quote unquote success. So I think this connotation comes from just this idea that a black woman can't really be a business person and a soft person and a wife and a helpmate and in a place of submission when allowed. Because when you use the word submission, a lot of women go like, well, I don't want to be submissive, without really understanding what the connotation is. It's not beneath someone or your spouse or your mate. It's really being in a space of understanding the balance of relationships. And we're just not taught that we can be that. We're typically taught to fill all the voids, to make sure everything's going afloat, to take the abuse from any and everyone, and to always take the upper road to know that we could pray it through or, stand there with them or whatever it is. And that's just something that I think a lot of black women are really tired of dealing with. So this idea of soft is so unique because it's really the best word to use for this desire to find a environment that's typically identified as masculine that allows for room for women of color, black women, to be female, feminine, and still respected without having to demand it. And I don't think a lot of people want to really address it. I think it's really something that's kind of going to continuously be spoken. You see it a lot in social media, and it's talking more about tangible things. It's talking more about, peace comes from the idea of having money and being able to travel and buy, name brand, high-end designer things. And that's all fine. I think that's a great thing. But I saw the funniest post on Instagram a couple of days ago that said, don't go broke trying to create a soft life, right? And I think that's the part of the conversation that I'm asking you when I say, what do you identify soft life as? Because, again, I'm giving it to you from my perspective as a black woman, but I'm also not really telling you that when I would think of soft life, I would be in a space of understanding it's just a piece. It's not necessarily financial scenario, but just being truthful. When you are not under financial stress, it continues. Soft life with me or for me would definitely be just the ability to rest, the ability to understand that I don't have to live in the sense of threat. I mean, I think a lot of times we go through the happiest times, but also the saddest times, or you're really conflicted with what your emotions are, because to be in a place of peace allows you to really relinquish this idea of threat. there's so much threat that comes along with being Black outside of being a Black woman solely. Just the idea of being Black in America is a complex scenario due to the premise that there's just never a relief of threat. Not for myself, not for my children, not for anything of the sort. And I think when I think soft life, outside of the idea of financial, I think peace. And I think a release of a threat. And I would say, I believe that that's what most people are trying to say. So when they're using the idea of travel and money and status as soft, I think it's more of this idea that the Western civilization has driven home that in order for you to have peace, you have to have money. And I'm going to agree with that, but I'm also going to disagree and say, of course, money gives you options, right? It doesn't necessarily remove the idea that you'll release all threat, but it does give you options. And I think that's the part that we're not really trying to understand when we think financial. I love to buy designer just like anyone else who enjoys fashion. I love to travel just like anyone else who enjoys different cultures and environments. But for me, peace remains in this idea that I'm not in a space of continuously needing to work to make money. Because I understand that money gives me options. I don't necessarily want to be under the threat of losing it. There's so many of us, especially people, again, of color, especially Black people, who are continuously making money, but under the threat of losing it. And it's not really spoken about a lot because so many of us want to still then have the facade that everything is so great and you can do all these things. But typically, there's still this threat of not really being enough and not really being the one. What I've always found very interesting in the Black community is that we really don't have the ability to have multiple great people. It's like we're continuously pushed to always have to be number one, right? And what I mean by that is that just being great is not enough. You have to be the best, the number one seed, the one that is doing it above everyone else. And then I giggle about that because I did see and hear what I thought was very interesting, that someone made a statement, and I think it's like an Audible that's going around right now that says, if someone is doing the same thing that you're doing, it doesn't mean that they're competition. And I hate to say that, but I absolutely will tell you that that's very prominent in the Black community. And I think when I'm saying soft life, it's just eliminating that threat. It's allowing people to be wherever they want to be without the sense of losing something or being judged by it or being gauged or, rectified in the sense of you have to be number one in order to be successful. It's really, really strange when you think about it because there's not a lot of business people, entrepreneur people that are able to just enjoy their business, right? It's like there's always this idea of like, who are you competing against? And you're continuously told how you can't really be as great as the next because you're not in the top 10 or the top 50. It's like everything is a number. So I think when most people are thinking soft, it's really why it just becomes financial. I guess, and I'm saying all of that to say, I don't think people are really understanding that it's really peace. It's really the idea of understanding that you don't have to fight everything. Like everything is not competition. You don't have to, as a female, I don't have to fight a male. As a Black person, I don't have to fight for my space in the room or at the table or whatever you want to use as a metaphoric statement. It's just this universal humanity place for me personally when I think soft life of just common respect and common camaraderie, I should say, amongst the community of human people, mankind, to allow people to be where they want to be. Now, there's plenty of women who would say, Percita, I don't really mind walking into a room and somebody thinking that I'm dominant because I'm going to just be my true self. And if that is your case, I'm not negating that should be your case. I'm saying that the people that don't want to be that or don't want to be classified as that or maybe who aren't that and they're trying to be that in order to get space into a room, they're the ones that are really pushing this whole idea of soft life. Because again, to hear someone make a statement about soft life is based on finances, and you can have soft life, quote unquote, and good credit, just literally gives to me the wrong connotation of what I think soft life is really trying to mean as a whole for, I'm going to particularly say, the Black community, because I can only speak for that. So I don't know, I just thought it was interesting. And it's such a broad statement. It would be different things for different people. But I think even that would be strange for people, because not everybody wants, the big house and, lots of travel. Some people's dreams are not bad or wrong. They're just different. And when they're different, they're still classified as not necessarily being successful, because let's just be honest, riches is what's identified as successful. And the average person would tell a person with money that you have no problems. Like, what problem could you possibly have? You have money. What could you really be going through? You have money. And I think that's why I'm trying to say that when we say soft life, I hope that we're thinking about it deeper and broader than just the idea of money. And that's why I keep using the word peace. And again, somebody might say, Percita, I just need a piece of money, girl. That's all I'm trying to say. I don't knock that as well. I'm just simply saying that when I think of soft life, it really took my mind in like a complete circle. And because I've only been Black, right? I only know what the Black situation is. I can't speak on it from any other perspective. It just gives light to this idea of really saying that we're just really ready as a culture to be embraced properly under the auspices of really leading the way in so much that we're just not, one, compensated for, nor acknowledged. So I think a lot of what our culture goes through just is based on the premise of those two things. So I don't know. I mean, it really took me through a loop, but I've been thinking about it for a couple of days. And, and for the people who are not Black, I do apologize if this is over your head, but hopefully it has given you some insight on just the concept of being Black in America and what that is. It's not even really to say America, because I've traveled extensively, and I would tell you that being Black, for the most part, worldwide, is very much so the same thing. And it's kind of interesting when you think about it, that we're still having this type of conversation, even after all of the strides that we have made, that we are making, and that we continue to make. So we'll keep it going. If you guys get tired of me, I'll know by the views if you don't really want to talk about the subject. Hate to tell you, my channel, my subjects, just saying. But I would definitely say we're going to keep this soft life conversation going. But I still ask you, how do you identify soft life? What do you think about it? What comes to mind when you think about it? What word does soft life identify with you? Mine is peace. Mine is definitely peace. And stillness. Let me put that out as well. So I want you to tell me what you think. Hit me in the comments. Let me know how you feel about it. And again, what your word of soft life is and possibly what it means. That'd be awesome. If you've been with me this far, greatly, 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 greatly do I appreciate you for staying. And of course, I'm expecting you to like this video. Even if you didn't, hit the like button. It's so much nicer than the dislike button. Make sure you comment, make sure you subscribe, and hit the notification button. I greatly appreciate it. And before you can do any of those things, I'm going to ask you to do one simple thing. Actually, it's three, but one. Live life authentic. Thank you so much for joining me. Have a wonderful weekend. I will see you next week. And make sure you follow me on all the other platforms that you can remember. All that information's in the description box. Have a great weekend. Bye-bye.